called mixed categories because they combine factors that are both unwholesome, wholesome, indeterminate. So these are groups that have a kind of mixed constituency. And so the first of these is called the roots, the hetu or mula. And we came across these roots in an earlier chapter, which we discussed in last year's retreat. This was in chapter 3. But here they're grouped together again. And so these are spoken of as 6 roots. That is, we have the 3 unwholesome roots, which are greed, hatred, and delusion. These 3 roots, they're called mula or hetu, because these are the roots of all the other defilements. And also these are the roots as the motivations of all unwholesome behavior. Okay, their opposites are expressed negatively in Pali as just the negation of the 3 unwholesome roots: non-greed, non-hatred, and non-delusion. But as I said last night, these negatively expressed roots, good roots, can also be expressed in terms of positive qualities. Non-greed, for example, can manifest in acts of generosity, giving to others, detachment, renunciation. Non-hatred, in its positive manifestation, becomes metta, or loving kindness. And non-delusion, which is the elimination of misunderstanding, becomes wisdom. And now, of the roots, the 3 latter roots would not be called exclusively the wholesome roots, because these roots can be both wholesome and indeterminate, or karmically neutral. Okay, so these we can call the good roots would be present when they're present in wholesome states of consciousness. Then they are wholesome roots. But there are resultant states of consciousness which have roots. In order to understand these states of consciousness, you have to go back to the earlier chapters. But we see in the earlier chapters, particularly if you look at the general, I think this is page 70. You can see that there are beautiful states of consciousness which are resultant both in the sense sphere, in the fine material sphere, and in the immaterial sphere. So those resultant states of consciousness have roots there, which means that they're stronger states of consciousness than the rootless consciousness. And the good roots are present in those resultant states of consciousness. What's interesting, the unwholesome roots are never present in resultant states of consciousness. The unwholesome roots are present only in unwholesome states of consciousness. This is because the results of unwholesome karma, the states of consciousness that result from unwholesome karma, are always rootless. They are relatively weak. So this is why good triumphs in the end, according to Buddhism, because the results of unwholesome state of consciousness are weak, whereas the states of wholesome states of consciousness can be strong, and those stronger results have roots. Some of them have 2 roots, non-greed and non-hatred, and the stronger ones have 3 roots: non-greed, non-hatred, non-delusion. So, for example, the kind of consciousness that performs the function of rebirth consciousness and the bhavanga, the underlying stream of consciousness, for most human beings would be either 2-rooted or 3-rooted, either non-greed, non-hatred, or non-greed, non-hatred, non-delusion. But for those who are really interested in the Dhamma and really like to study the Dhamma generally, to have that interest and that inclination, it means that our rebirth consciousness is one with 3 roots, that we have some degree of the root of non-delusion or wisdom. Otherwise, we wouldn't have that interest and make that attempt to understand the Dhamma. So we could all give ourselves a round of applause for having probably 3-rooted types of consciousness. Sometimes there are people who like to do good, they have good inclinations, good tendencies, just by their nature. But when it comes to explaining anything intellectual to them that requires any kind of understanding or insight, they just can't grasp it. In that case, they probably have just the 2 wholesome or 2 good roots, not all 3. But don't get worried and think, oh, this Abhidhamma is so complicated. I must have only 2 roots. If you make the effort, I'm sure you'll get to understand, then you can be sure you have 3 roots. And then the 3 good roots are also present in what are called the functional consciousness of the Arahat. For example, in his everyday life, the Arahat will have maybe doing some good deeds. There'll be 3 good roots present. And then when he goes into deep meditation, of course, there have to be the 3 roots present. But those roots, because his consciousness is not considered wholesome, but functional, so we say that those are 3 functional roots. And so we have 3 unwholesome roots. The bad roots are always unwholesome, and 3 good roots, which might be wholesome or karmically neutral, indeterminate. Okay, the next set of factors is called the jhana factors. And here we might come for those who have studied the suttas, here we might come in for a little surprise. So we read the jhana factors. So there are 7 jhana factors. Initial application, this is vitakka, or sometimes called initial thought. And then there's vichara, here translated sustained application. But maybe I now translate this examination or sustained thought. Then there is, here it's translated zest. This is the Pali piti, which I prefer to render like joy. Then there's one-pointedness or unification of mind. Oh, I see. Somanassa is given here. So let us we'll keep zest, because this is a different term. So joy, somanassa, which is pleasant feeling, pleasant mental feeling. Then there's domanassa, which is unpleasant mental feeling, or displeasure, even dejection. And then there's upekkha, which is translated here equanimity. And this upekkha is not the equanimity of the balanced mind, but rather this is equanimity as a feeling. It's the feeling that's neither painful nor pleasant. We could call it neutral feeling. So these are the 7 jhana factors. And now, in the sutta terminology, the jhana factors would be the factors that are present in those states of meditative absorption called the jhanas. But in the Abhidhamma, the word jhana is understood in a broader way to mean, you see, the original word jhana comes from a root dhya, which means to think intensely upon something, to focus the mind intensely upon something. So in any activity, it could be good activity or bad activity, when the mind is intensely focused upon something, it's said that that state is, in this sense, a jhana, a state of intense concentration on something, intense focusing of the mind. And those factors which are responsible for focusing the mind on the object are jhana factors. Here, the Abhidhamma commentaries give an explanation. It says that the jhana is being used here in the sense of close contemplation or thinking about an object. And so the factors of that intense focusing or contemplation of an object are the jhana factors. So when we sit, for example, in meditation, maybe we're far away from the jhana, but we're just making the effort. Say, if you're doing mindfulness of breathing, bring the mind back to the breath. Keep the mind on the breath. So even though it's far from jhana, but just the fact that we are focusing the mind, not paying attention to other objects, but just trying to keep the mind on the object, on the breath, we're developing on those occasions, we're directing the mind to the breath. That's vitakka, initial application. We are sustaining the focus on the breath. So that is sustained application. We might feel some delight in that. That is zest. Actually, that's a good alternative for zest, delight. Then the mind, even if there's a lot of distraction, but still occasionally the mind will reach some state of unification on the breath. That's one point in this. And then at times there'll be feelings of joy, happiness through this meditation. Or if there's not a feeling of happiness, the mind will be fairly neutral. So that's the equanimity. So you could see, even in this sort of lower level state of meditation, preparatory state, the jhana factors can be present. And in many other wholesome activities, even when you're sitting listening as I speak, when I am speaking, I have to focus on the subject. So on those occasions, we have these jhana factors present. But the jhana factors can also be present in unwholesome states of consciousness, because the mind can be intensely focused on unwholesome states of consciousness. Have you ever seen a boxing match and seen the audience watching the boxers fighting each other? You know, they're completely absorbed. This guy's throwing a punch with his right. This guy blocks the punch with his left. So the audience, when this one hits the opponent, everybody, "Ray, Ray!" If this guy gets a punch, boo, boo. And if you come up behind these audience members with a needle and stick it in their behind, they don't feel it. They're completely absorbed. So you could say that from an Abhidhamma standpoint, the jhana factors are present in those. Yeah, I'm not joking. I'm not joking. I'm not saying this is the that these guys are close to arhatship, but the jhana factors are there. Those factors that keep the mind intensely focused on the object. Well, we have the case of, say, a boy has to meet his girlfriend at a coffee shop, and he's sitting by the window, always looking out. Is she coming? Is she coming? An old friend of his comes up and taps him on the shoulder, and he hardly feels it. He's looking, is she coming? Is she coming? So the mind is absorbed in that expectation. So that is occasions when these jhana factors are present. And how about domanassa, which is displeasure, sadness? Like if one loses sometimes a dear relative, some people become just completely absorbed in their sorrow. You know, like it could be sit down, oh, I lost my wife, I lost my husband, my brother, sister died. And they might be sitting there, they sit down in the morning after breakfast, and they just sit through the whole day completely thinking over, oh, I'm so miserable, I'm so sad, oh, if only they had lived on. So this is a state of absorption in one's sorrow, and that intense focusing on that sense of loss is also a kind of, from an Abhidhamma standpoint, a kind of absorption or intense focusing on the object. So we could say the jhana factors are present on that occasion. Yeah, then this is from Ledi Soyador, who was a great Burmese Abhidhamma master of the early 20th century. So he writes that the jhana factors are factors of a state of consciousness which has the function of intensely contemplating an object, whether good or bad. And that function of intense contemplation means directing the mind or keeping the mind directly on the object. And then it says that domanassa, you see domanassa, which is sadness, grief, or displeasure, only arises in states of consciousness accompanied by aversion. And so it's always unwholesome. So it's a kusala, an unwholesome jhana factor. The others can be wholesome, that is, when doing good, when you're focused on doing good, those are wholesome jhana factors. When one is intensely focused on doing something bad, Or another example, doing something bad. I don't know if any of you have ever robbed a bank. I can't speak from direct experience because I've never robbed a bank. But I imagine that a bank robber is intensely absorbed in what they're doing. No, you have to be, any lookout men, grab them from behind, put blindfolds on, or a gag over their mouth, and lock them up in the closet, then have to get into the bank, turn, you have the combination for the bank vault. So the mind is completely concentrated in doing something unwholesome. So these are unwholesome jhana factors. And then the indeterminate, for example, in the case of an arahat, either doing good deeds in his day-to-day life or when entering into the jhana meditations. Okay, maybe I'll just ask whether there's any questions so far on the roots or jhana factors. Take the microphone.
Bhante, on the roots, you mentioned that wholesome roots wholesome consciousness are stronger and unwholesome consciousness is weaker. Could you please elaborate on that? I'm not sure I understood that well.
I'm not sure that I said that wholesome states of consciousness are stronger than unwholesome. What I said is that unwholesome states of consciousness, their results are weak states of consciousness because they don't have roots. Whereas wholesome states of consciousness produce results which are stronger because they have roots.
Okay.
But if you look at the state of the world, you can see unwholesome states of consciousness tend to be stronger than wholesome.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Okay, Victor.
Hi, Bhante. Can you hear me? Okay. My question is about the roots of an arahant.
Yeah.
I know you were saying that all their chittas are basically functional,
Or what?
All their mental factors are functional.
Not all of them, because they also experience the results of their karma.
Okay.
Let's say their active states of consciousness are functional rather than wholesome.
Okay. And so when they do a good deed, like a sharing or something that would be wholesome, there's no wholesome karma being generated?
They don't generate any more karma because they've broken, you see, all karma stems ultimately from some underlying tendencies of craving and ignorance. And so when craving and ignorance are eliminated, then the actions don't create karma.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Jean, who's sitting right next to you or in front of you?
Yeah, I was just wondering, so 6 is not really mixed, right?
You have to put the microphone close to your mouth.
6, a displeasure or domination is not really mixed because it's always unwholesome.
No, the group is mixed. The group of jhana factors is mixed.
I see.
Yeah.
Oh,
But
so
domanassa is always unwholesome.
Okay.
Okay, Kim and Sam, then we have to move on. Wait, you have to take the microphone.
Thank you. I just need some clarification. Is functional and indeterminate the same?
Indeterminate is a broader category. Indeterminate means neither wholesome nor unwholesome. And so what comes under indeterminate will be functional states of consciousness and resultant states of consciousness. Okay, Sam?
Bhante, when you said like somebody contemplating sad occurrences,
Yeah.
deaths and things like that, how is that generating jhana factors or
Here,
I mean-
as I explained, jhana factor is not being used in the sense of a factor of the jhana meditative state, but it's the intense focusing of the mind on some object or situation.
because it seems like something so incredibly negative or unwholesome, it's kind of taking you away from that.
Yeah, but you see, the Abhidhamma is using the word jhana in the broader sense. It's not confining the word to the meditative state of absorption, but any kind of absorption. Not to speak of sorrow, but even the example that I used of the bank robbers. They're intensely absorbed, focused on every little detail of the task of robbing the bank.
And if that kid waiting for his girlfriend, if his girlfriend never showed up, he'd like reach the highest states of jhana?
No, I think you're misunderstanding me then.
Because you said if he's waiting and he's in deep absorption.
He's absorption in the ordinary sense, not meditative absorption, but he's completely focused on the expectation that his girlfriend is going to come to meet him. This is a wider sense of the use of the word jhana as intense focusing of the mind, not in the sense of meditative absorption. Okay, now we have to move on. Now we come to what are called the path factors. Now, in the sutta way of speaking, the path factors are always used in the sense, or I'm not sure if the word path factor is used in the suttas, but it gives the impression of the factors of the Noble Eightfold Path. But in the Abhidhamma, path factors includes two kinds of the factors that make up two kinds of paths. Call it the right path and the wrong path. The path that leads to states of bliss, states of happiness, and the path that leads to states of misery. And this could be understood, the wrong path factors are the factors that lead to a bad destination, that is, to a bad realm, an undesirable realm of rebirth. And the good path factors, the right path factors, are the factors that can lead to a state of good rebirth or fortunate rebirth. That is, to rebirth under good conditions in the human realm, or to a rebirth in the heavenly realm. And the path factors can also lead to nibbana. And so the commentary explains path factors. So the paths are so-called from leading to, from bringing the attainment of either a good destination or a bad destination, and also to nibbana. And so the factors that make up that path are called the path factors. And so taking together the good path and the bad path, the right path and the wrong path, according to the Abhidhamma, we have 12 path factors. So these are the 12 path factors, and this needs a little explanation. So we have 8 right or good path factors: right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. And then we have, this will be a little puzzling, 4 wrong path factors: wrong view, wrong intention, wrong effort, and wrong concentration. So what is missing from the wrong factors? Okay, what is missing? What? No, we have right speech, right action under the right factors. Okay, wrong speech, wrong action, wrong livelihood, and wrong mindfulness. And so the reason for this, we have the explanation given in the guide. Okay, we have, I'm on page 273. Of the 4 wrong path factors, wrong view is the chaitasika, the mental factor of views. And that is the only exclusively unwholesome mental factor among the path factors. The other 3 factors are, in terms of chaitasikas, they are initial application, energy, and one-pointedness of mind in the unwholesome chittas. And so when there's an unwholesome chitta, an unwholesome state of consciousness, there's thinking in that state of consciousness. That thinking is wrong, or especially thinking that becomes the motivation for an action. So that directed thinking, motivational thinking in an unwholesome consciousness is wrong intention. Then that consciousness has some energy, so that is considered wrong effort. And the mind is focused on the object, focused on the task. So that is one-pointedness of mind. But that one-pointedness of mind is wrong concentration. But now we see the explanation that there are no distinct path factors of wrong speech, wrong action, and wrong livelihood, because according to the Abhidhamma, these are simply unwholesome types of conduct motivated by the defilements. So when I speak lies, or when I slander somebody, or get angry and speak harshly, that is simply speech which is motivated by a citta in which there's either greed or hatred. And similarly, when I do something wrong, like killing or stealing, that is done through a state of consciousness in which there's, say, greed or hatred. But it's said that there's no distinct mental factors of wrong speech, wrong action, wrong livelihood. This is, as I explained last night, sometimes I have to scratch my head and say, this seems a little odd to me. And then we come to what I find to be really problematic. Maybe somebody can set me straight and correct my heresy. But the absence of wrong mindfulness. So it's said that there is no factor of wrong mindfulness, since mindfulness is an exclusively beautiful chaitasika absent in the unwholesome chittas. Okay, I'm scratching my head, and coming back, please don't call the police for me. This is purely a hypothetical example, but I'm coming back to my bank robber or my team of bank robbers. Doesn't it seem that they are entering the bank with extremely mindful? We do our walking meditation, right step, right step, left step. If you have to open the door, lifting up the arm, touching the door handle, turning the door handle, pulling open the door. I imagine, I'm sorry, the bank robbers are doing pretty much exactly the same thing. Of course, it's not directed to a wholesome end, but that's what makes it wrong mindfulness. That's what makes it wrong mindfulness. But it seems to me that they're extremely mindful in what they're doing. I know one of the sort of counter-arguments of the Abhidhamma is that mindfulness is always a beautiful factor. So at the time that they are approaching the bank, opening the door to the bank, turning the combination to the vault, since they're being mindful, those are wholesome states of consciousness. But when they're taking the money out of the vault, that's an unwholesome state of consciousness. I don't quite buy that. Okay, but that is my own personal opinion, but let's put my personal opinion aside and just say that according to the Abhidhamma system, there is no wrong mindfulness as a separate mental factor. But when there's wrong mindfulness, it means that, well, what does it mean? It means that maybe the mind, is doing something wrong. I was going to say it's doing something wrong with mindfulness, but again, that doesn't make sense. Anyway, let's just leave it that there's no wrong mindfulness as a mental factor in the Abhidhamma. And I believe this is the Sarvastivada, the other great Abhidhamma system of the northern India. They have mindfulness, I believe, as a mental universal or as a variable, so that it can be wholesome or unwholesome. So it seems amongst the early Abhidhamma masters, there was a difference of opinion on that issue. Okay, let's go to the faculties now. The next group. Now, in the suttas, we find different sets of faculties mentioned in different places. But in the suttas, there's no general category called the faculties, in which the Buddha says, I'm going to explain to you all the faculties. But in one sutta, he'll speak about the 6 sense faculties. Other suttas, he'll speak about the 5 spiritual faculties. Other suttas, he'll speak about the faculties as different types of feelings. And so what the Abhidhamma formulators have done is to gather together all of these different types of faculties under one heading, which they call simply faculties. And so we have 22 faculties. And the word that's translated faculties in the Pali word, you can see in the book, is indriya. Indriyani is just the plural form. The word indriya is based on or derived from the name of the chief of the Vedic deities, whose name is Indra. If you read the Vedas, then you see that Indra is the chief of the gods. And so the word Indra comes to suggest some role of lordship or rulership. And so a particular Dhamma, a certain factor of existence, is called a faculty in the sense that it exercises control. It exercises control in a particular area, its own specific domain. And so here we have 22 faculties mentioned, and of these 22 faculties, the list begins with 8 faculties that are material. They belong to the aggregate of material form. So we have first the 5 sense faculties: the eye faculty, ear faculty, nose, tongue, body faculty. And actually what belongs together with the 5 faculties is the mind faculty, is the 6th faculty. But because this list separates the material and the mental, and the mind faculty is mental, so it comes later in the list. It doesn't follow the 5 sense faculties. The 5 sense faculties are types of material phenomena that exercise control or rulership in their own particular domain. Thus, the eye faculty, we could say, exercises control in the process of seeing. The ear faculty exercises control in the process of hearing, and similarly with smelling, tasting, touching. And each of these faculties refers, as I explained last night, to a particular type of sensitive matter. The eye faculty, it's not simply this gross organ here, but it's the sensitive matter of the eye, which is responsive to light. The ear faculty is that sensitive matter in the ear, which is responsive to sounds. And so the nose faculty, the sensitive matter at the top of the nose, or inside, deep inside, that is able to respond to fragrances. Okay, then comes the femininity faculty. Actually, we have a pair here, the femininity faculty and the masculinity faculty. So these are said to be, the femininity faculty is the faculty that is responsible for somebody's manifestation as a woman, and it also controls various aspects of female behavior, the deportment, the feminine deportment, mannerisms, way of conducting oneself, and so on. And the masculinity faculty is the counterpart, that which manifests, which is responsible for a person manifesting as a male and is responsible for what we call masculine modes of behavior, deportment, posture, and so on. Maybe if we were speaking in terms of contemporary biology, the feminine is XX chromosomes and masculine XY. Is that? Okay, maybe we could say the femininity faculty would be represented in modern biology by the XX chromosomes, the masculine faculty by the XY chromosomes. Okay, then there is the life faculty. That is considered the faculty of vitality, that which gives life to the body. And so when the life faculty is either cut off prematurely, or it fades out over time at the end of one's lifespan, then what takes place is death. And so the life faculty is that kind of material phenomena that sustains the life of the body. Okay, then the mind faculty is said to be consciousness itself. So just as the 5 physical sense faculties exercise dominance or control in their own respective domains, so the mind faculty is the mental faculty which exercises control in the area of, we could say, thinking, contemplation, reflection, all the inner mental activities. Okay, next we come to 5 faculties which are different, you say, which are differentiations of feeling. So usually we speak of 3 types of feeling, either pleasant feeling, painful feeling, or neutral feeling. But to get the 5 faculties, what we do is to divide each of these, or at least we divide the first 2. Okay, so pleasant feeling gets distinguished here according to whether it's physical or purely mental. So the physical pleasant feeling, that would be pleasant feeling of touch, touching something which is pleasant, is called pleasure, or the pleasure faculty. Then the physical touch of something which is painful, that is called the pain faculty. But then when we are happy or joyful, that is also a feeling, and that is called the joy faculty. Whereas when we are upset by something, despondent, sorrowful, or sad, that is called the displeasure faculty. So these 2 feelings, pleasant feeling and painful feeling, are distinguished. Each is distinguished according to whether it's purely physical or whether it's an inward mental state. The third feeling, neither pleasant nor painful feeling or neutral feeling, equanimity, is not distinguished in that way as physical and mental. I don't know why, because I could also distinguish a neutral feeling, which is purely sensory, from a neutral feeling, a feeling of balance, of the kind of equanimous feeling. For example, if I just see something, I'm walking down the street, I'm just passing stores and people, no interest in them. So it would seem to me that my seeing is accompanied by neutral feeling, whereas if I'm challenged in some way and then I have to maintain equanimity of mind, then there's a neutral feeling going along with that. So it seems to me that one can distinguish equanimity according to whether it's physical or purely sensory or a mental quality. But even in the suttas and the Abhidhamma, that distinction is not made, but it just speaks of the neutral feeling as it just uses the term equanimity. Okay, and these feelings, they're called faculties because each of these feelings plays a very dominant role in our inner life, you say our emotional life. So when we're feeling joy, for example, that joyful feeling has control, a certain control over all the other states of mind we're experiencing. Where when we're experiencing sadness, grief, unhappiness, that feeling of unhappiness will exercise control over the rest of our mental life. Okay, then we come to another group of 5 faculties, which are called the 5 spiritual faculties, or we call them the 5 spiritual faculties. The Pali doesn't use an adjective, it just uses the same word, indriya, faculties. So these are faith, energy, mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom. And now these 5, as a group, are going to come under the aids to enlightenment. So I'm going to discuss them more fully when we come to the next section, the aids to enlightenment. And just to complete the section on the indriyas, I'm going to take the next 3, which have rather strange names. It seems like strange names. I remember learning the name of the first of these. I had to memorize it in Pali. Ananyatanya samitindriya, which is translated the faculty. First I'll read all of them, then I'll explain them. This is the faculty, I will know the unknown. I will know that which has not been known. Then the next is the faculty of final knowledge, or maybe better, the faculty that leads to final knowledge. And the third is the faculty of one who has final knowledge. Now, what is called the faculty, I will know the unknown, this is the wisdom faculty of one who has reached the path of stream entry. This is the first breakthrough to enlightenment. So that is the faculty of wisdom, sort of backed up or driven by the determination to know that which has not been known before. And what has not been known before are the 4 Noble Truths, or more specifically, the unconditioned nibbana. So that faculty by which one is moving towards knowledge, direct knowledge of the 4 Noble Truths, is the faculty, I will know the unknown. And now from the next stage, from the fruit of stream entry, up to the path of arahatship, one now has the knowledge of the Dhamma, the direct knowledge of the Dhamma, but one is still developing this knowledge. One is leading this wisdom, growing or fostering this wisdom onward through the remaining paths and fruits, onward to the stage, the final stage of realization, the knowledge of arahatship. And so that is called the faculty of final knowledge. This is the wisdom faculty by which one advances from the stage of stream entry to the stage of arahatship. And then the Arahat has completed the direct knowledge of the Four Noble Truths, completed the realization of Nibbana. And so for the Arahat, the wisdom faculty is called the faculty of one who has final knowledge. We have the clarification of these faculties in paragraph 22. I have on page 275. So this is the technical explanation. So among the faculties, this is the bottom, it is explained that the faculty, I will know the unknown, is the knowledge or wisdom of the path of stream entry, the knowledge of that first realization, the first breakthrough to the truth of the Dhamma. Then the faculty of one who has final knowledge is the knowledge of the fruit of arahatship. That is the one who has completed the development of the path. And then the faculty of final knowledge is the intermediate kinds of supramundane or world-transcending wisdom or knowledge. Okay, I think it's about time for a little break. So it's 3:10, and let us see our schedule. We have a break until 9 o'clock tonight. Okay, so it's 3:10. We come back at 3:30.